Good evening. This is Chair Hemalata Dandekar, and I'd like to call this regular meeting of the Planning Commission to order. Deputy City Clerk Kevin Christian, will you please call roll?
Commissioner Hopkins?
Here.
Commissioner Khan?
Here.
Commissioner Quincy?
Here.
Commissioner Shoresman?
Here.
Commissioner Wilkin?
Here.
Vice Chair Jorgensen?
Here.
Chair Dandekar?
Here. Thank you. Let the record reflect that commissioners are present through teleconferencing. I'd like to remind my fellow commissioners and staff to help us reduce background noise by muting your phone or microphone unless you're speaking. Commissioners, would you join me for a pledge of allegiance to the flag? Kevin, do we have a flag?
I'm sorry, I don't have it available at this moment.
Would you join me for a pledge of allegiance to the flag? I pledge allegiance.
Allegiance
To the flag.
to the flag.
United States
of America.
And
to the republic
stands
for which it stands,
one
nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So the first meeting item is the minutes of the Planning Commission meeting of February 10th, 2021. If anybody has comments on the minutes, please unmute your microphone and identify yourself. Are there any comments? I can't see everybody, but I am not seeing any unmuted microphones.
You know, I'll just have one comment. I really appreciate staff summarizing the item we had off of Garden Street. I thought they did a good job summarizing, and I appreciate that because there was a little bit of back and forth. So with that, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you very much.
I'll second.
Commissioner, who's seconding? Sorry, everybody's gone.
That was me, Commissioner Quincy.
Commissioner Quincy seconds. Will the Deputy City Clerk please call the roll of the motion? Deputy City Clerk, could we have a call of the motion? To approve?
Commissioner Hopkins?
Yes.
Commissioner Quincy?
Yes.
Commissioner Khan?
Yes.
Commissioner Shoresman?
Yes.
Commissioner Wilkin?
Yes.
Vice Chair Jorgensen?
Yes.
Chair Dandekar?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. At this time, we'll hear any public comments for items not on tonight's agenda. Items raised are generally referred to staff, and if action by the Commission is necessary, may be scheduled for a future meeting. As you can see on the screen, participants of the webinar may submit a question containing their name and the item number they wish to speak to. Once public comments for the item is opened, your microphone will be unmuted and you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Deputy City Clerk, do we have any public comments for items not on the agenda?
One moment.
Just a second. Chair Dandekar, actually, because we've moved to Zoom, if any of the attendees would like to speak on items not on the agenda, if you could please just raise your virtual hand and we'll call on you that way.
Okay.
I just want to give them a minute to do that.
And so I can open up the participant function and
That is correct.
if anybody has a hand up.
That's correct. It does not appear that anyone would like to speak on items not on the agenda. So I think we can move on.
So there are no, I will see all the participants on the right, will I?
That is correct.
Lovely, thank you. Seeing no hands for any items not on the agenda, let the record state that any court challenges to the action taken on public hearing items on this agenda may be limited to considering only those issues raised at the public hearing or in written correspondence delivered to the City of San Luis Obispo at or prior to the public hearing. If you wish to speak, please give your name and address for the record. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Consultant and project presentations are limited to 6 minutes. The second item on our agenda has been, which was a review, has been continued to the next regular meeting of the Planning Commission, scheduled for March 10th, 2021. This was an environmental impact report for the Rail Corridor Agency. The third item on our agenda today is an address at 1328 Foothill Boulevard, and we will get a presentation from Kyle Bell. Oh, Kyle Van Leeuwen.
Yes, thank you. Kyle Van Leeuwen here.
Kyle, I'm sorry, I forgot to ask if any commissioners had any ex parte disclosures of contact or with anyone who's provided information to them, not on the record, so that the information can be entered into the decision-making process. Commissioners, could you raise your hand if there's been any ex parte disclosure? I see no hands raised. So now, can Assistant Planner Kyle Van Leeuwen please present the report?
Kyle, this is Kevin. You should be able to just take over the screen when you need to.
Kevin, you need to lower yours.
Yep, that's what it's showing me. Okay, there we go. So we'll share screen. Can everybody see the first slide of the presentation here?
Not yet. We see you, Kyle.
That happened, right? There we go. Okay. Okay, there we go. All right, we are here to discuss the request to establish a new sorority use, Delta Gamma, on a property with 3 existing dwelling units in the high-density residential zone. Just 1 second, there we go. Staff's upfront recommendation is to adopt the draft resolution approving the conditional use permit to establish a new sorority use based on findings and subject to conditions of approval. The PC review is due to requirements per the zoning regulations. The uses allowed per zone do state that a PC use permit or conditional use permit is required for fraternity or sorority use within the high density residential R4 zone. The PC's purview is to review the project in terms of consistency with the general plan, zoning regulations, and applicable city standards. The project site is located on Foothill Boulevard, near the very end of East Foothill Boulevard. This is in a neighborhood comprised of primarily R4 zoning and does take vehicle access from a private street, which is along the east property line. And that private drive does extend all the way back to campus, shown by that arrow there. So this location is about 100 feet, 200 feet, I believe, from the edge of Cal Poly campus. This project does include, the site does include a duplex and a detached apartment above the garage. This will be used for primary housing for no more than 6 members of the Delta Gamma sorority as stated by the applicant. In terms of staff's evaluation, one of the things that staff does look at is Sorority uses are considered a group housing. Those have specific limitations per the zoning regulations. In the R4 zone, it is a limitation of no more than 55 persons per acre. This site is approximately 8,900 square feet or 0.2 acres, and that equates out to a max density for occupants of 11 persons. This application is requesting only 6 people to live on the property, so this would be consistent with that standard. In terms of events, there has been a approach that's been used for what I can tell is the last 3 or 4 fraternity and sororities, and that is to take that max occupancy provided by the group housing and allow 1.5 times that number for any events. This would affect this by setting a limit of 17 persons for any routine meetings or gatherings. Any larger gatherings would require a separate approval by the Community Development Department. In terms of parking, parking requirements for sororities and uses have 2 calculations. One is that 1.5 spaces per occupant, or 1 space per 1.5 occupants, or 1.5 spaces per bedroom, whatever is more. And in this case, the 4 bedrooms at 1.5 spaces per bedroom is 6 parking spaces. And the applicant has identified 6 parking spaces on site. 4 of those 6 spaces provided would be in a tandem arrangement, 2 in front of 2. This is a picture of the overhead of the property. It shows where the parking spaces are proposed. As you can see, there's room for 1 in the garage, 1 tandem space behind that. There would be a space beside that and another tandem behind that. And there are 2 spaces that were previously approved through a grading permit and building permit that are directly off of the private drive there. There have been some questions about those parking spaces being consistent with front parking standards for performance standards in our zoning regulations. So what is important to understand for that is that at the time of those spaces being created and permitted, the definition for front yard parking only was between a public street and a building. So the area shown there in light blue is the front yard parking area prior to about November of 2018. These parking spaces were approved in 2017. At the time, they were consistent, as they are not considered at that time front yard parking. So there's also a question about, is that now non-conforming? Non-conforming does apply to development standards, where the front yard parking standards are actually performance standards. Those performance standards state that vehicle parking is allowed on driveways leading to garage parking or on other approved off-street parking pads and spaces. As these are approved spaces, they are allowed spaces and are, even though current standards would include that side area as front yard, they are previously approved. So they do meet this requirement that they are allowed to remain as they are previously approved. One other change with the new zoning regulations update in 2018 is how we would look at that street for a setback. Prior to 2018 update, this area was considered a side yard, not a street yard. So the parking is allowed within that side setback. In the current zoning regulations, this would be seen as a street corner side yard with the setback of 10 feet. So those parking spaces are legal non-conforming in regard to normally parking spaces are required to be beyond that 10-foot setback line. And this application does not increase or change any of the nonconformity on property that was currently there. Another question came up: if tandem parking was one of the requirements to approve tandem parking is that it is consistent with the context of the neighborhood. The fraternity that's directly across the street, which was approved in 2013, actually has 6 parking spaces, all of which are in tandem. So those are shown there. So this shows all the parking that's in tandem if this were to be approved just on this portion of the block. In terms of consistency with the general plan does state that sororities and fraternities should be limited to the medium, high, and high density residential neighborhood. This is a high density residential neighborhood. It also says that they should be close to Cal Poly. And again, this location is only 200 feet from Cal Poly. And that concludes staff's presentation at this time. I'm happy to answer questions. I think there may be some, and I have some additional slides that might help explain some questions if they come up.
Thank you, Kyle. I'd like to call upon the planning commissioners in alphabetic order for questions and comments of staff. Commissioner Hopkins.
I have no questions at this time. They were addressed by the staff memo on the issue on the item. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Khan.
Yeah, I have one question for Kyle. I went by the site today and I noticed that the sorority letters were up in the building, and are they already operating as a sorority?
Sure. So I did check with that. It looks like back in September of 2019, during a routine inspection by our community services officer, he did notice those letters and did document. We have it in our system that this is currently a non-conform or an unpermitted sorority use. This did not come as a complaint from anybody. So code enforcement officers informed them that they were not yet approved and they needed to go through the approval. They submitted for this application in December of 2019. Of course, with everything else that happened last year, their priorities and code enforcement's priorities were not to necessarily push this along.
Yeah, it wasn't a complaint. It was just a curiosity. The place looks very good and neat and well kept, but I just was curious about that. Thank you for that clarification.
And technically, they shouldn't have letters up unless they're approved.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Quincy.
No questions. Thank you.
Commissioner Shorsman.
No questions, thanks.
Commissioner Jorgensen.
No questions.
I have no questions either. Thank you. May we have an applicant? Is there an applicant presentation, Kyle, or is your presentation it?
Don't believe they had a presentation, but the property owner is a representative in this application. John Olson, I believe he was going to attend. I'm not sure if he had anything to say or not.
Okay.
This is Deputy Clerk Christian. Mr. Olson is in attendance, and when you're ready, I can promote him so that he is able to turn on his video and microphone. Just let me know when you'd like me to.
If Mr. Olson is prepared to make his presentation, now would be a good time, Kevin?
Excuse me, Chair Dandekar?
Yeah.
I didn't get a chance to ask a question.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Commissioner Wilkin.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to thank staff for the correspondence answering the questions regarding parking and also the status of the code enforcement action and the additional explanations today about the code. I did have one question about the tandem parking arrangement. Is tandem parking allowable for multi-use projects? When I looked at the code section for tandem parking, it seemed like it only applies to single unit dwellings.
Yeah, I see. Let me see. I'll bring that up. The section is here. The last sentence does add that for single unit dwellings, required parking can be provided for tandem in configuration with state. That isn't to mean to apply for every section above that. We definitely review and look at tandem parking, and have supported tandem parking for more properties than just single family or single unit dwellings, in line with director's actions required findings of mostly neighborhood compatibility.
So the practice has been to review tandem parking and multifamily projects as well, right?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you. That's all the questions I have at this time.
Thank you. I see Mr. Olson is ready to present. So Kevin, can we have him present next?
I have just promoted him. It will take a moment, and he should be able to turn his video on.
I have to hit stop share.
Good evening, commissioners. I'm John Wilson. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
That's great. Well, I just wanted to say that we're very happy to get the use permit now. To this point, through COVID, there was some delays in moving it along. We moved it along with Kyle's help and with Hannah's help previously as fast as we could. We're very proud of the property, and we feel it works great in the neighborhood. This particular sorority needs very low occupancy. They're very careful about how many people are on the property at any given time. We've had a really good experience with them, and you can, I think, see when you drive by the property how well kept it looks, and it seems to be functioning very well. And I'm, of course, happy to answer any questions from any of the commissioners that they may have.
Thank you. Are there any questions of the applicant, commissioners? I can see if you'd like to raise your hands rather than go individually, I'll be happy to call on you. I am not seeing any hands raised. So
I'll just raise my hand, actually.
Oh, did you? Good. Commissioner Schwartzman.
Just a quick question. Just wondering how long the sorority has been occupants there.
The sororities, I believe they're now finishing their, they're about halfway through their second lease. So they had an initial 12-month period. We were very new at the whole tenant demographic of having a sorority. So my wife Claudia and I had a learning curve there to understand what some of the requirements were, what was necessary for us to do. We walked through all of those when we were made aware of the fact that we needed to formalize the tenant. And we spent the better part of a year through the bulk of their tenancy, having communication and correspondence back and forth with planning to be sure we were doing everything we needed to do. If there were any changes to be made on site to the building, if it had been looked at for ADA access, and all the things that were that led up to getting us here tonight took a considerable amount of time. So I think probably they were in the property perhaps 6 months before we initiated the process to formalize the use permit.
Commissioner Schwartz.
Thank you. That's my only question.
Are there any other questions of the applicant? I look at both your virtual hand raised and your actual. I don't see anybody with questions. So thank you very much, Mr. Olson.
Thank you for the time to speak. I appreciate it very much.
Commissioners, it's back to us for discussion. Are there any comments, any discussion that is needed on this item from anyone? Commissioner Khan, did you wish to speak?
Yeah, I'll just say one comment is I was up in the area, like I said earlier today, and there's a lot of pretty high density up there. There's a lot of sororities and fraternities existing up there today, and the use seems to cohabitate fairly well with the uses around it in that particular area. My wife was actually a sorority member of Alpha Chi Omega, that is the building directly up Crandall Way from the sorority, and it's always seemed to work well as its sorority functions. So I think it's a good use.
Thank you. Any other comments? Commissioner Wilkin.
Yeah, thank you. I think that the project as proposed generally meets the zoning requirements and does seem to fit into the neighborhood and the surrounding uses in the R4 zone and the other fraternities. I did visit the site. I did have a little bit of a concern about one of those two parking spaces that is off the driveway on the gravel area. It looked pretty small and not too accessible to me. So, but I understand that it was approved previously. I would suggest, well, I guess we're not at the point of conditions yet, but maybe I should make a motion, but or I'll wait for someone else to make a motion. I do have a couple suggestions on conditions if the commission is inclined to approve this. And one has to do with that parking space, and just to verify the dimensions, that it meets the minimum dimensions for a parking space. And then the other had to do with condition 2, which my concern is the due process with the property inspections. And so I have some suggested language on that, but maybe I should wait until somebody makes a motion on the project before we discuss conditions of approval.
Chair Dandekar, I'm sorry, this is Deputy Clerk Christian. I'm sorry, Commissioner Wilkin. Before you do discuss further, I just wanted to remind you that you had not called for additional public comment.
That is correct.
That should happen before.
I'd like to finish getting input from all the commissioners before we move to public comment. So, but I was aware that we needed to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you, though, for the reminder. Commissioners, are there any other comments or that you have? I don't see any. So, Deputy City Clerk, do we have any public comments on this item?
There are no attendees asking for to speak at this time. Let me double check and make sure that there was no additional emails that may have come in concerning the item. And there have not been, so no, we have no public comment.
Okay, then. Commissioners, we're open for deliberation, and if there are further considerations, we should deliberate, and then if not, I'd like a motion and a second. Is there a motion and a second?
I'll move to approve the resolution.
Thank you. Commissioner Schwarzman moves. Is there a second?
And this is Commissioner Hopkins. I'll second.
Thank you. Commissioner Hopkins seconds. So deliberations. Commissioner Wilkin, you had some?
Yeah, thank you. I do have a couple of suggestions for conditions. The first would be to simply add a condition that requires that the proposed gravel parking area off the driveway be verified to meet the minimum parking space dimensions before operation of the use. And the second has to do with condition 2. And the way I'm reading condition 2, which specifies the maximum occupancy of 6 people or 6 residents on the property and allows inspections of the site. The way I'm reading that is that it's an ongoing condition such that maybe staff could put the condition up on the screen so the commissioners can see it. The way I'm reading that condition is that it allows inspections inside the property upon 24-hour notice. And to me, that seems pretty intrusive and contrary to due process. So what I would suggest is that the city be allowed to do the inspection inside the property prior to operation of the sorority. In other words, an initial inspection, and then thereafter that the inspections be done by the city upon 24-hour notice, but only in the event that there's a substantiated written complaint that's been filed.
I would like to call on the staff.
There's the condition. Okay, so that's the condition that says that no more than 6 persons shall reside on the site at any time and allows the inspections. So my proposed language is the underlines and the strikeouts. So again, basically what it says is that there's an initial inspection to make sure that there's no more than 6 persons on on the property. And then once the sorority is allowed to operate, then the city can inspect with 24-hour notice, but only if there's a substantiated written complaint, as stated in the language there, from the code enforcement, police department, or other citizen that supports the conclusion that there's more than 6 people on the site. So, and that, I think that would afford the property owner a due process. Those are my suggestions. I would support the project with those 2 conditions added.
If I may, I'd like to ask staff if the wording, if they have any comments on either of these conditions. Perhaps the wording in this document is sort of standard for all sorority fraternities. Does staff have any comments on these?
I think my only comment would be that this is a pretty standard condition. This was pulled from the previous approval, which was 2016. I believe it was also on the approval for the permit across the street back 2013. I think it's maybe helpful for commissioners to know that I think about once a year, if it's not once every other year, code enforcement does what they call sorority and fraternity week, and they go and do their standard inspection of all sororities. So this would actually be potentially eliminating them from that ongoing list of active sororities that the code enforcement officers do inspect on a yearly basis. I think it's within your purview to change this condition if you see fit, but I did want to let you know that that would be a one-off from just about every other approval.
And has the driveway capacity, the appropriateness of the driveway size already been ascertained?
You know, I think if there are concerns that you know, bushes grew or those spaces have somehow gotten smaller, that is perfectly fine condition to say prior to commencing of sorority use, those spaces are verified. We would set up an inspection to do so.
But staff has not done so far at this point.
No staff has been out there recently with measuring tape. No.
Thank you. Commissioners, I can't see you anymore, but are there comments?
I do have a comment, if that's our question, I guess, more of the proposed language that Commissioner Wilkin has proposed, where it states that the city must receive a substantiated written complaint. I guess I'm wondering what he would be defining as substantiated. What would that look like?
This is Commissioner Wilkin. Where I got that language from is actually condition, and I don't have the number. I think it's the last condition that is in the conditions of approval. And that's where that language came from. And it has to do with, now I forget what exactly the condition says. Maybe staff could put that on the screen, but that's where the wording came from.
We do have a standard condition with all conditional use permits, and I don't have that language to put up, but it, you know, essentially says Planning Commission, use permit referred to Planning Commission for reevaluation if the city receives substantiated written complaints from any citizen, code enforcement officer, or police department employee, and it goes on.
It's condition 13.
Condition 13, correct.
What constitutes substantiated in any of the other conditions that it's used? That seems like there would have to be some police verification, which to me implies some sort of inspection already. So it seems a little bit redundant.
Sure.
Like if someone's going to write a complaint about a neighbor because they think that the property is being used outside the bounds of what it's permitted for, does it already have to be substantiated by police documentation in order? I have a hard time sort of understanding how that would work.
In terms of what's substantiated, I know the code enforcement officers do have specific things that would substantiate that a complaint is more than just a complaint. I don't know specifics on that in particular.
Okay.
Again, 13, condition 13 is pretty standard condition, and the other condition is, yes, a little bit of a repeat, but that is in connection to what code enforcement does when it comes to sororities, which is inspect for safety, even if it's not something that's been reported.
I guess my comment would be, I don't have any real concern about, I would want to see this sorority treated the same as all other sororities. I'll just say that for the purposes of our discussion.
That's my feeling too. I'm sorry. I need to see if other people wanted to chime in on the commission, but my sense was also that this sorority ought to be treated like all the other fraternities and sororities have been. Are there comments from other commissioners? Please speak up because I'm not seeing you right
This
now.
is Commissioner Hopkins. I just wanted to note as the second on the motion, I'm in agreement with Commissioner Shoresman of that approach of just keeping it in with that bundled inspection process.
And this is Commissioner Khan. For staff's presentation, they said they had a week when they inspected all the sororities and fraternities. So it's probably pretty well noticed that, oh, this is inspection week, and I think it probably has to do at the beginning or the end of the school year, or sometime when it seems appropriate. So that does seem appropriate to me to have that inspection. I do agree with Mr. Wolken that it seems a little bit, I wouldn't want to be living in a place and suddenly get noticed that they're going to come in and inspect my house in 24 hours. I'm like, what? So I kind of see where both sides are going, but I do agree with the second, and that it would be okay to have the inspection during that annual weekly sorority and fraternity inspection process.
Commissioner Quincy and Commissioner Jorgensen, we haven't heard from you. We have heard from the motion maker and the second, but we haven't heard from you.
I support the project. I also support Commissioner Wolken's language, but I could just as easily go without it. But I understand what he's doing, and I agree with the sentiment behind it. And I don't have any issues with the word substantiated. I think that just means that there's evidence supporting the written complaint, any evidence. So I'm okay with that, and I actually think that's a good idea. Perhaps we could, after the word thereafter, we could say thereafter, other than for annual sorority fraternity inspections, the applicant shall allow the city to verify occupancy. But those are my only comments.
Commissioner Jorgensen?
Commissioner Jorgensen, you're muted.
You can't hear you.
Go.
We can't hear. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, everything's in a little different place tonight. Sorry.
Yeah.
I support the project. I'm also in support of Kyle's representation of the condition, that it really is used everywhere, and it seemed sufficient to me. It also seems like generally leasing contracts have a 24-hour notice requirement for an inspection or to bring in a handy person to repair something, unless there's some emergency. So this all seems like pretty standard language. I'm not sure it needs the extra polishing that has been suggested by Commissioner Wolken.
So it seems like the motion maker and the second would like to keep the motion and the second, keep the the verbiage on this item the same. What about the parking, suggested parking oversight? Everybody agreed that that would be a good thing to add?
As the motion maker, I'm amicable to adding that language about the parking, the condition.
And as the second, I echo Commissioner Shorsman's comments as well.
So Commissioner Wolf.
It's a good idea.
Yeah, so there seems to be agreement on the first condition, Commissioner Wilkin, but not on the second. Would you like us to vote on the second, or what is your position?
Thank you. This is Commissioner Wilkin. No, I don't think that's necessary. I understand the concern that there's, and I wasn't aware about the annual inspections of the sororities, and so this would be different than the standard practice. So so I appreciate that. I do like Commissioner Quincy's suggestion, but it sounds like there's probably not support for that either. So I don't think a vote on that added condition or proposed change to the condition is needed. But it sounds like there is agreement that prior to occupancy or operation of the sorority, that the gravel parking area be verified as to the minimum parking dimension. So I'm fine with that.
Good idea. Good.
So I think we have a motion with a second and one condition. If there is no further debate, I think we are ready to vote, are we? Unless there's something else anybody would like to bring into our deliberation. I see nobody raising their hands. So Deputy City Clerk, could we have a roll call of the motion?
Commissioner Shorsman.
Yes.
Commissioner Hopkins.
Yes.
Commissioner Khan.
Yes.
Commissioner Quincy.
Yes.
Commissioner Wilkin.
Yes.
Vice Chair Jorgensen.
Yes.
Chair Dandekar.
Yes.
Unanimous, passes.
Great.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you. We'll move on to item 4. The public hearing item before us is to review a project located at 3806 Ranch House Road. I'd like to ask planning commissioners for their ex parte disclosure of contact with anyone who has provided information to the planning commissioners that is not on the record, so that the information may be used as part of their decision-making process. Commissioners, could you raise your hands if you've had an ex parte communication? Commissioner Hopkins.
Chair Dandekar, I don't have an ex parte communication, but I will be recusing myself from this item as my employer is currently in partnership with the developer to fulfill the remainder of the inclusionary requirement. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So Commissioner Hopkins is recusing himself. Do other commissioners have any ex parte disclosures? Seeing none. Could Associate Planner Kyle Bell please present the report to the Commission?
Chair Dandekar, this is Tyler here. This item, there was some agenda correspondence that came out this afternoon, and we continued this to a date certain of March 10th. And so you will not be hearing this item tonight.
Oh, I see. Well, good. So in that case, this item is continued. Did you say to a date uncertain, Tyler?
No, to a date certain, March 10th.
To March 10th. Item number 4 is continued to March 10th, Planning Commission meeting. The next item on our agenda, staff updates and agenda forecast.
All right, well, thanks. And so just to talk about the next meeting on March 10th. We had 2 items that were scheduled for tonight that got continued. So the LoSAN EIR scoping meeting will be on that agenda, as well as the 3608 Ranch House. In addition to that, we are going to have a presentation on the general plan annual report. And so we have 3 items scheduled for the upcoming meeting on the 10th. And then looking out to the second meeting in March on the 24th, we also have a couple items scheduled. One of them is the Northwest Corner commercial development, Broad and Tank Farm. We'll be coming back before the commission with a recommendation from the Architecture Review Commission. And we also have airport area and Margarita area specific plan amendments that relate to childcare and allowing those facilities to happen in those specific plan areas due to changes with the noise contours with the airport land use plan. So that gets us out through March, and happy to answer any questions if you have any for me.
Commissioners, any questions for Tyler? I don't know what you're going to be doing for the rest of the evening. But it looks like we are ready to adjourn this Planning Commission meeting, and at a record early point in time, I might point out. A well-deserved short meeting for commissioners. We've had a rigorous schedule. I just want to say that the next regular meeting of the Planning Commission is scheduled for Wednesday, March 10th. 2021 at 6 p.m. via teleconference. So the meeting is adjourned.
Good night,
Thank you.
everyone.
Aye.